This is the fourth week of our Relentless series. We're talking about our word for the year. And last week, I thought we had a really special set of services where we talked about greatness. And if you remember, we said that through valor, courage, and sacrifice, we can walk through the fear, insecurity, and suffering that are on the front porch of greatness. And then last week, if you remember, we showed a video that I thought was really powerful, and it made my eyes sweat every single service. I was like, what is wrong? It's hot in here, you know? But that was really moving. I just want to emphasize, because there was a little bit of confusion, the couple in that video were not in that video because of an amount that they gave. They were in that video because they were representative of so many families, old and young, rich and poor and middle class and everything, who all sacrificed together in a proportionate way to bring us to where we are. And I'm grateful for that. And I also want to take a moment just to say, and this is a big deal to me, people have commented that this church is what it is because Kristen and I moved here, and on my sinful worst days, I want to believe that that's true, but it's actually, like, as a matter of fact, not true. This church is what it is because of generation after generation being faithful, but specifically, I think, because of 100 families, like John and Julene and others, who sacrificed, who stayed the course, in spite of their fears and insecurities to bring us here. And I really think that just about any pastor could have built a great church on the foundation that was laid here. It was set for success. It was super fertile ground. And I just want to acknowledge that and say how grateful I am for that. And last weekend, we talked in more detail about our building effort in Hebron. And this is Commitment Sunday, where we're bringing, at the end of this message, our commitment cards. We're going to do our regular offering and commitment cards. It's not too late for you to participate via text if you'd like to. But this week, I got a message for you that I think is going to be special and pertinent and helpful. And what I want to do is I want to talk about how the value of things changes over time for us. And I still remember when I was a young man, and by young man I mean like 4 years old, going to Circuit City with my dad and buying one of these. Do you remember this? I mean, this was a real revolutionary thing, okay? Before VHS and Betamax, did anybody invest in Betamax and then be like, dang it, you know, that was not good. Anyway, before VHS and Betamax, if a movie came out, you could only see it in theaters. And kids, you don't understand this. Like, as soon as a movie was out of theaters, you'd never see it again. Like, you couldn't see it. That was your one shot, one opportunity to see that movie. If you were lucky, they might show it on TV, but there was no DVR. There was no way to record it. You had to sit, if it was an hour and a half long movie, you had to sit through 4 hours of commercials mixed with a little bit of movie here and there to watch the movie on TV, and that was your only way to see it. And VHS came out, and it changed everything. It was like, you mean I can just watch a movie like whenever I want? This is life-changing. If you had a movie on TV, you could just record it and remember, like, pressing record as soon as it started. But sometimes they put that, like, special presentation, universal, blah, blah, blah. And then they do more commercials, and it'd be like, dang it, you know, that's on the video now, too. Anyway, VHS changed everything. After VHS came this thing called DVD. And a lot of kids, you never had one of these in your house, but you'd put this disc in here, and it was basically the same thing as VHS, except, VHS, if it started to wear out, it would be, like, a little blurry and fuzzy. DVD would be, like, things going great, and then all of a sudden it would just stop working, and you couldn't see the end of the movie. I think DVD was a little bit worse than VHS in my mind. But anyway, do you know anybody who had a collection of movies that looked like this? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you go to their house and it was like, wow, I mean, you really sent home the mail there. You went all out. And I cannot overstate how important these movies were to people. Like, people loved their collections because you would get a DVD or a VHS and it was yours. You know, I remember taking the cellophane off of one of these things that you'd get, you know, and it'd be like, oh man, you'd smell it and you'd be like, this is mine. This is going to be important forever. And you could smell it and think, and it was mine, right? In college, they started doing something where they would release a whole season of a TV show on DVD. And I don't know if you guys remember this. This used to not be a thing. Okay? You could get movies, but you couldn't watch a TV show. Like, if you wanted to watch, let's say, Full House, there would just be an episode that would pop up, and if you'd seen it before, you still had to watch it. You know what I mean? Because it's not like you could be like, oh, I've seen this one, I'll just pop in another DVD. That's not how it worked. You just had to watch whatever they showed you. But then this came out, and this whole new thing got invented called binge watching. Okay? And I don't know if you guys have ever done a marathon or a binge watch, but this is where you just sit down and you just watch things. And this is where I kind of fell off. I couldn't do that, right? I had friends in college. There used to be this horrible show called 24 that featured this guy named Jack Bauer. And once a year, he would just have a really bad day, 24 hours, where he had to, like, do these horrible things. And people would watch 24 in 24 hours, which is 24-hour-long episodes, 1-hour-long episodes. It's just crazy that people would do this, but that's binge watching. Now, in college for me in the early 2000s, DVDs were literally the most important thing that you had. Like, that's what mattered. Like, DVDs, you would select Friends, girlfriends, like based on the DVDs that they had. You could be like, hey, we're incompatible here. I see what you've got going right there. It ain't going to work. You know what I mean? And if you had no DVDs, you had no friends. Like they were everything. They were the most important thing. And then Netflix came out. If you remember Netflix, people used to mail you DVDs in the mail. But then Netflix started having this thing called live streaming. I remember someone tried to explain it to me. I was like, what's the point? You don't own it. You know what I mean? Why would you ever want to? If you don't own it, what's the point? Like you'd say they could just, but all of a sudden I saw live streaming. And I saw it and I was like, wait, we could watch any of these that we want? I mean, how many pages are there? There's basically infinite pages of movies and whatever and documentaries. I mean, we could just, every movie is available on here? Like, this is crazy. This is life-changing. And I want to be clear. I dreamed of having a collection of DVDs like that picture I showed you. I fantasized about having access to any TV show I wanted and whatnot. And then Netflix came out and the world changed. Like all of a sudden, everything that I ever dreamed of came true. But what also happened is in one fell swoop, everybody's collection of DVDs became absolutely worthless, right? Like when we moved here, I took what was formerly my most precious possession. I had I didn't have that many DVDs. I don't know, 20, 30 DVDs, okay? I took all my DVDs and I was packing up in 2014. We were packing up our house. Remember this, Chrissy Cole? And I took all my DVDs. I'm like, do you want to bring these? She's like, no. And I put them in the garbage. I just threw them away, right? Because Goodwill didn't even want them. They were like the bottom of a muffin. Who wants that, right? It's worthless. We just had to throw it away. You couldn't even throw it. It's just worthless, right? And I thought I was going to show my grandchildren these DVDs. I thought these are like my favorite movies. I'll have them forever. I'll keep a DVD player around. I'm going to show everybody these things. They were worthless. They went from being so valuable to completely not valuable. What happened? There was a revolutionary discovery that made a radical change in the value of my DVDs and VHSs. What was once really valuable was not valuable anymore. This happens all the time. You ever met someone who refuses to accept that reality? You know what I mean? They hang on to a collection of something that's but why though? Why? Why do you still have that? You know what I mean? They hang on to a baby crib. Their kid is 16 years old. It's but we could use this someday. You know what I mean? We might need this. When you have I'm just going to hold on to it. I'm just going to hold on to these DVDs in the boxes in the garage because someday they're going to have value, right? Have you ever had that happen in your life? There's a story in the Bible. Jesus has these disciples that follow him around, and they have this experience that totally changes the value of everything in their life. And I kind of want to unpack that for you. Today's key passage comes from Luke chapter 5, starting at verse 1, going all the way through 11, verse by verse. It's page 617 in the church Bibles on your chairs if you'd like to follow along there. I'd encourage you to follow along on your phone or in a church Bible. This one's going to be helpful to follow along, to highlight, to underline, to take notes in. But the book of Luke is obviously written by this dude named Luke. And what I like about the book of Luke is Luke did not grow up in church. Okay, Luke grew up outside of church. And to me, it's kind of helpful to get his perspective. He has a different perspective than some of the other authors of the biographies of Jesus' life. And Luke was super well educated. He is probably the best, most articulate writer in the New Testament. And he wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else as far as word count goes. That's kind of interesting. Most people think Paul did, and Paul wrote 12 or 13 books, depending on how you count. Luke wrote just the book of Luke and the book of Acts. But, as educated people are, he's super long-winded. So anyway, starting at Luke chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "One day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed into him to listen to the word of God." And there's two keys here, shore of the Sea of Galilee and great crowds pressing in. It sort of set the scene. Now, shore of the Sea of Galilee means that it's a natural stadium. Okay, it has this big embankment that's like natural stadium seating. Some of you have been to this part of the Sea of Galilee, and it's a great place to have an outdoor concert. Kanye West might have a Sunday service there someday for real. It's a really beautiful setting. And then the other key word here is great crowds pressing. Jesus healed many people. And in Luke chapter 4, just before this. And he's kind of an entertaining and engaging speaker. This is early in his ministry, but if some dude is healing people like a boss and, Disney Plus hasn't come out yet and there's no TikTok and you don't have smartphones, people are like, I'm there. I'm coming. There's nothing else to do. Let's show up. And we don't know exactly how many, but we know that a conservative estimate would be over 3,000 men, women, and children. And listen, I hear people bash mega churches all the time, and we're not technically a mega church. We don't have skin in that game yet. But whenever somebody does bash a mega church, I'm always like, but wait a minute. You don't like Jesus' church then, right? I mean, you don't because big churches are biblical churches. Jesus later in his ministry would have tens of thousands of people in his church. Peter's church was adding thousands every day. And every time I hear someone say, well, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, I was like, well, was Peter's church a mile wide and an inch deep, or were they disciple making, right? Because I think growth is a sign of disciple making. Now it says pressing. Chrissy Cole, I need you to come up here. here. Come up here, babe. Come up here on the stage. Just jump right up, okay? So great crowds pressing. This is my favorite part of this passage right here, okay? Now, it says they were pressing. I need you to press in on me. Press in, close. No, don't hug, just press. Stand right here, okay? So everywhere Jesus turned, he had crowds pushing down on the countryside, like pressing in on him. And he's trying, and they're up in his face, and he's like trying to shout over them, but they're up in his face. Closer, honey, closer, okay? And he's trying to talk. Thank you, honey. Round of applause for Kristen, okay? Now, that's awkward, because he's trying to give a message, and he has great crowds pushing down. He's getting like stepping into the water, right? What do you do? And that explains the next part of the passage right here. It says in verse 2, he noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them there and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon. Now, he would later rename Simon Peter, okay? So the Apostle Peter, Simon Peter, they call him both. He's got 2 names. Simon is its owner. He asked him to push it out into the water. So he sat, and this is key, he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. Now, a lot of you would wonder, why is he sitting in the boat? Well, boat is a bit of an exaggeration. There's some debate about the size of Peter's boat, but I think it was probably not much more than a glorified canoe. And have you ever taken your young kids canoeing? I, on several occasions, have, because of reasons I don't understand, chosen and elected without being forced to take my children canoeing. And every time I get them in the canoe, I'm like, this is a terrible choice. This is just going to end terribly. And I'm trying not to stroke out here being like, sit down, everybody sit down, we're going to drown, I can barely swim, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm worried about you too, but please, me, you know what I mean? And it's, the boat. So he's sitting in the boat. But this was his solution because the crowds were pressing in on him. And it was a nice little stage. Most people in most parts of the world cannot swim, right? You want to be alone in Japan? Just go to the deep end of the swimming pool. There ain't going to be nobody out there, right? And Jesus knows what's up. So he pushes this boat out. And he's teaching to this natural stadium seating on the stage that no one but him can get to, right? Now it says in verse 4, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Now, Simon is probably just pumped to be a part of this. He just got to be a part of the biggest gathering ever. He got a backstage pass. He's literally got to have his boat be used. He has a backstage pass, right? And I mean, he before had like 200 followers on the gram with some photoshopped abs. And right now he is just getting blown up, right? He's got like 2,000 follow requests. He's got people sliding into his DM on the Snapchat. I mean, it's just crazy, right? And he's like, this is the greatest day of my life, right? And as they're pushing out, everybody's broken into after parties, right? On the beach, they're having bonfires, groups of 20 or 30. Everybody's singing and laughing. Simon is kicking back. This is the greatest day of my life, right? And he's in his boat, which is every man's happy place, praise God. And he's thinking, this is awesome. Biggest gathering of people I've ever seen. I got to be the center of it. Now I'm hanging out with the J-Man on my boat. Life is good. Life is good for him. But then Jesus goes and does something that is inappropriate. I don't know if you guys ever been on a boat, but there's a certain etiquette on a boat. What don't do on a boat? You don't tell the captain, the owner, what to do, right? You don't. If you're in a boat, you say, hey, that looks nice over there. Have you ever thought about going over there? Could we go over there? Might we go over there? But you don't tell him, hey, let down your nets over there, right? That's not what you do. But the J-Man bosses Simon Peter out. Now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. And you could tell in Peter's response that he's a little torqued off. I want you to see this right here. He says, Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night. We didn't catch a thing, all right? Like, I'm tired now. You're borrowing my boat, okay? And you just done worn out. You're welcome. I fished all last night. Why don't you make like a tree and leave, right? Why don't you make like a baby and head out? This is too much. But if you say so, right? Notice he's being a little snarky here. But if you say so, I'll let down my net and we'll try again, right? And that's his way of saying, I'm a little mad. You can tell he's offended, which is just kind of funny. I love that Luke includes these details. Now, the other thing you need to know about how they fish is how they fish. Their nets, they didn't have a pole. You know why they didn't have a fishing pole? Because metal was prohibitively expensive and extremely rare. They didn't even have a hook. They had to use a net that was about the size of a twin bed sheet. It would be organic. It would be super time-consuming to make. It would be super not durable. It'd be in a circle with little rocks around the edges to weight it. And they'd throw it out, and the net would then fall to the bottom. Now, normally if you're net fishing today, you can be somewhat successful because you can chase schools of fish, with a motor. But they did not have a motor. They had a paddle, right? So fishing in that day and age was not great. Many fishermen would fish all night and not catch something. That was not rare. But you didn't need to catch that much because animal protein, because fish were super valuable. Most people lived only off of farm produce. And having meat was super expensive. Catching a fish every few days would be enough to sustain a business. Now, Simon Peter owned this business, and no doubt, he dreamt of getting rich. He dreamt, he had fantasies about, wouldn't it be amazing? Like, have you ever just sat back and fantasized about having something like that you really want in your business like happen? Like, he just dreamt of like, wouldn't it be amazing if I like pulled up the nets and they were so full that they were like ripping and like the boats were just like full of fish? That would be amazing. And we've all done that. Like, we've all fantasized about catching something in our proverbial net, haven't we? Like, we've all dreamt of, for me in college, I would have been like, man, I wish I could get a net full of DVDs, right? I wish I could have a full collection. It's so ironic because I don't watch movies anymore. But in college, they were valuable to me. I just wish that I could just have thousands, as many as I want, right? We all fantasize about getting different things. Peter has dreamt of getting a boat full of fish. In verse 6, it says, and this time their nets were so full, they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. This is the fisherman's fantasy. Not just catching a trophy fish. This is life-changing wealth. I mean, this guy just won the lottery. Like, this is literal stuff of dream and legend. It's hard to estimate the value of the fish here. There are papers, literal, academic, published, peer-reviewed papers that have been written on this. But it would have been life-changing wealth. Today, they estimate that at minimum, conservatively, filling these boats to the point of sinking with fish would be about $100,000 in value today. But in an economy where the average income was about $150 a year, like adjusted for inflation in today's dollars, they were all impoverished, right? So he earned 750 years of income with his one catch, right? That's kind of a big deal. That's life-changing. It's a life-changing. I mean, what would you do? Imagine trying to make ends meet, keep your business going, and all of a sudden you earn 750 years of revenue in one catch. His life, his dream, it's changed in this moment. I started thinking, as I was writing this message, about what I dream about catching. I want to ask you a question. What do you dream about catching in your nets? You know what I mean? Like, Peter has this dream fulfilled. And I think before we go on, it's just important to think about, like, what do you actually dream, proverbially, of pulling up in your nets? For some of us, it's $1 million. For some of us, we dream of, like, pulling up a husband in our nets. We want to catch one. For some of you, it's like pulling up a dead husband. Like, I don't want him in my life anymore, whatever. For some of you, it's a level of revenue in your business, right? It's not an amount of money. It's just a level of revenue in your business. But I think Simon Peter's reaction is interesting, because you'd think he'd be like, yes, I'm in the money, my dream came true. But that's not what happens, because a lot of times when our dreams are fulfilled, a lot of times, number one, God does it in a way we didn't expect, or number two, it doesn't bring us what we thought it would, right? And for Peter, his reaction is a little bit peculiar, because you'd think he'd be like, yeah, baby, I'm going to market, I'm selling these fish, I'm getting a new boat with twin power poles and all this stuff, it's going to be sick to the max. But that's not it. It says when Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before the Lord and said, oh Lord, please leave me, I'm such a sinful man. For he was awestruck by the number of fish that he had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. Now, Luke, who knows these guys personally, just finds this humorous. I love that he basically says they're stammering morons in this moment, right? He just wants to include that. No reason, right? Because he knows this wasn't a lucky catch. He knows it was more than that. And sometimes I wonder what he was thinking, you know? I mean, think about this with me just for a moment. It's like looking at a pile of DVDs after discovering live streaming. All at once, you're like, wait a minute. So these DVDs that I wanted so bad, I guess they're not worth anything anymore. You know what I mean? Like these fish, they don't really matter much, do they? Like, they had so much value to me a moment ago, but now they don't really have that much value. All of a sudden, he's standing next to the source of fish. I mean, think about it. Peter is sitting here, and he knows that this is not normal. Like, he's a fisherman. He's fished his whole life. He knows this isn't normal. In fact, he's probably thinking, Jesus commanded those fish to swim into my net. Like, Jesus is the source of fish, the master of fish, not just in that moment, but maybe Peter is beginning to realize, maybe this Jesus has allowed me to catch any fish and every fish that I've ever caught in my life, right? He's starting to think he's Lord over all of it. Like, he's getting scared because he realizes he can command the fish where to go. He knows his fish could keep him going for years, but in that moment, fish were like DVDs after Netflix. They had so much value, but now they don't. He had to think about the fact that Jesus filled his boat. Like maybe he's starting to realize Jesus is more valuable than these fish. Like, the fish are nothing compared to Jesus. It's almost as though, in some sense, he's beginning to realize that he didn't catch these fish. The wealth is not his. It belongs to Jesus. Like everything in his life, he's starting to realize, maybe this wealth isn't mine. Maybe I'm just a steward of what God has entrusted me with. Right? Like, I'm just here, and God ordains what I'm going to get. And this is what happens when we become a Christian. The way we look at everything changes. Everything. The way we look at fish, jobs, money, kids, spouse, joy, sadness, tragedy, good times, bad times, everything we wanted in our nets. Everything we wanted in our nets to be full of. Like, it all changes when you become a Christian. Have you ever had that moment in your life where the value of everything changes? I think for a lot of us, God is like an upgrade to our nets, not a transformation of what we want to bring into our nets. I remember when I met Kristen, Pastor Bruce Rama, he introduced me to her in the lobby of the Elk River movie theater. And I remember I just saw the side profile of her face. She hadn't fully turned to me yet. And I thought, that's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. I want one, right? I want that, right? And then we had a 5-minute conversation as we walked down this hallway because we had church in the movie theater. We walked down this hallway and we were just talking. And I thought, that's the most captivating, beautiful woman I've ever talked to in my life. I thought, I'm going to marry her. So I called my parents, my best friend, my brother, my cousin, my aunt, and I said, I met the woman I'm going to marry today, right? And 6 months later, we were married. But listen, before that moment, I had this thing called Little Black Book. You remember these? Remember these right here? Okay, this is before smartphones. What you had is these little black books as a backup because, you'd put all your numbers in your phone, but then if you lost your Nokia brick phone, there was no iCloud, right? Remember your Nokia brick phone? You could throw that thing out a window and it could explode into a bunch of pieces and you put it back together. It'd be fine, right? Let's play snakes. But anyway, I kept this little black book of backup, and in that black book, I had a page of numbers, of girls' numbers. And these were all girls that, I was thinking about pursuing, but really, they were there just in case. If we're both 29 and it's a rainy day, maybe we'll call each other and say, all right, let's get married. You know what I mean? They were there just in case. It was like a security blanket. They were valuable to me, very valuable to me. But after our first date, I literally tore that page out of the black book. I deleted those numbers from my phone because I'm at the source. And I realized in that moment, I could never marry somebody who is less captivating than this woman. Now that I've seen her, it transformed the value of everything else in my life. Peter met the source of fish, and he knew that he could never see an individual fish in the same way again. He no longer worried about money. He no longer worried about fish. Jesus was Spotify to CDs. He was Netflix to DVDs. He was the internal combustion engine to horses and buggies. It all became a novelty after meeting Jesus. And his reaction totally makes sense to me. I want you to check this out, okay? It says, Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. And this is critical, as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. Note, it does not say, Peter prayed for several days and talked with his friends, and he talked with the bank, and then he liquidated his assets, and he sold the fish at a fair market price, and then he followed Jesus. That's not what it says. That's not what it says at all. What does it say? What does it say? It says, as soon as they landed, he left the fish rotting in the sun inside of his boat. Because he was with the one who controlled the fish, the one who had all the fish. Why keep DVDs when you have Netflix, right? Why hold on to these? And this was a big moment for Peter. All at once he realizes there was more to live for than just being alive. He realized something doesn't come from nothing. Intelligent design doesn't come from no intelligence, right? He's like, well, I could just follow the silly religion of unaffiliated, right? I could just continue to walk around lethargically. I could follow the superstitious ideology of atheism, but I can't ignore the facts. God is real. It was a DVD to Netflix moment. And I think that is what discovering God feels like. In one swift moment, the values you place on everything changes. It's a new value system. And I just want to ask you, have you ever had a DVD to Netflix moment with God? I think this is such a critical question to ask yourself. I mean, when you follow Jesus, it changes everything about your values. Suddenly, the things that were once really valuable, they're no longer valuable. This is what happens when you become a Christian. All of us as Christians, have had a moment where Jesus changed their value system, whether we can remember it or not. God existing means we're no longer living for pleasure alone in this life. It means that people are more than animals. It means that there is a standard of good and evil that's bigger than our feelings. We're accountable to more than just ourselves. This is a big deal, right? It's so interesting, too, because Christians, like Christian ideology, the Christian movement has been behind almost every major human advancement, every major human discovery in human history. And I think that's really cool. And you know what's interesting, too, is we see the teachings of Jesus received from, universities. We see people begin to ignore facts. They say your feelings matter more than facts. Your safety is more important than discovery. You are the most important thing in life. And what do we see? We have seen a slowdown in scientific pioneering. We've seen a slowdown in the human advancement and in society's advancement, right? Because the teachings of Jesus do good things for society. Suddenly, all the things that were once really matter just don't when you follow Jesus. But also, many of the things that didn't matter do. Like how we act when no one's looking. Like what we think about inside of our minds. All of a sudden, we are accountable to a higher power for all of those things. Our money, too. Just like when Jesus had power over the fish, and Peter realized that with every catch, it wasn't his control, but God's design, so it is with our finances. This isn't my money. This is something that God entrusted me to steward. And there's a big difference between those two things. Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed him. See, this is a really big deal. Jesus is redefining Peter's value set right here. Okay? Peter sees money isn't valuable, and Jesus, in that blank space, says something else matters. He's redefining what matters. What does he say here? From now on, instead of the target of your life being building your business, all of a sudden the target of your life is now fishing for people. Jesus says it's not DVDs, it's not fish, it's not a happy family, it's not successful children that matter. People are what we dream of catching. People are what matter. The goal of your life is no longer fish that fade away. And this is crazy, but everything in our life is going to end up in a landfill. Everything in this life. Everything, except for people. People are the eternal beings housed in these mortal temporary bodies. That's what really matters, right? That's what matters. That's the eternal being. And the Bible is full of examples of people having these moments, right? Mary, this prostitute, in a day when people smell bad and everything smelled bad, it wasn't physical beauty that you tempted men with. It was good smells. And she has this priceless bottle of perfume, right? And she encounters Jesus, and she has a DVD to Netflix moment. What does she do? She breaks her alabaster jar at Jesus' feet, recognizing that in Christ, the thing that was formerly valuable is no longer valuable, right? And she leaves it. Paul is rich and famous, and on the road to Damascus, he's achieved so much with his life. All he does is win. He's got awards and rewards and achievements and trophies and medals and all the stuff. But he encounters Jesus, and what does he say in Philippians 3:7? I once thought these things were valuable. I once loved DVDs, but I now consider them worthless compared with what Christ has done. Yes, everything else is worthless when compared with the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I've discarded everything else, considering it all as garbage. And the word garbage here is actually like sort of a Greek mild swear word, right? But we can't say it in church because you guys would yell at me. But I'll just let Peter Strand, you look it up. Anyway, so that I could gain Christ. He's literally describing his DVD to Netflix moment. Even Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus, would have this moment when he sees the temple veil torn in two and the sky darkened. He throws his bag of silver back in the temple because he realizes who Jesus is. Because when you follow Jesus, the way we view time, money, people, morality, it's radically changed. Jesus isn't an upgrade to your life. He's a transformation who changes the way we live. And I want to ask you, when did this happen for you? Have you had this moment in your life? If Jesus is just another thing that you add to your shelf of stuff, he's an upgrade rather than a revolution that changes the value of everything in your life, you're missing the point. Jesus calls us to value people, This is why we're building this building in Hebron, right? I mean, this is why generation after generation, 127 years ago, 23 Dutch families founded this church. They left the boats and the fish behind. They volunteered to build our old building, and from their poverty, they gave many generations the gospel, and instead of casting their nets for whatever they were casting for, they began fishing for people. This is why in 1997, we decided to radically change how we worshiped as a church, and we fought a battle for decades to leave the boats behind because the value of our preferences and dreams and worship styles was nothing compared to the value of the gospel. And instead of casting our nets for whatever, we began fishing for people. This is why in early 2015, 91 families gave $6 million, and they left their boats and fish behind to build this building. Instead of casting their nets for whatever, they began fishing for people. And we're sitting in their sacrifices, aren't we? Right now, we're sitting in their sacrifices. And at every moment, people demonstrated this DVD to Netflix understanding. A boat full of fish moment where they realized Jesus changes everything. And instead of dreaming of catching whatever we were catching, we dreamed of becoming fishers of people. And today we're bringing this commitment to raise $3 million to reach people we don't even know in a town that many of us drive through. And from the outside, it seems crazy. And if you think it is, listen, God's got you. I want you to know, please don't feel guilted into participating in anything. God isn't about our money. He asks us to give to him because he knows where our treasure is. There our heart will be also, right? He knows that money directs our heart. But listen, when you stand next to Jesus and you watch him fill the boat, as so many of us have watched, we realize he's Lord of everything. And that he's the only one who holds the keys to eternal life. And the choice is clear. We're not here to catch fish. We're here to reach people. We're fishers of people. People are what matters. I had the creative team put together a video that I think helps show why we do this. And it's a really moving video talking about fishing for people and what that looks like. And I'd really love for you to go ahead and play that video right now.
I was running from something, And at the time, I was a kid, and I didn't know what it was. There was just something missing, no matter what it was, I didn't really fit in, man. So I started to drink more. It became a everyday thing. And of course, I started hanging out with the people that partied because they accepted everybody, and I felt like this was where I belonged. One night I was walking back to my house, and the police stopped me, and I was a minor under the influence. They gave me a charge, and he sent me to adult prison. I ended up doing 5 years and 3 months. There was still something missing. I looked for it in relationships that never lasted. I looked for it in sex, alcohol, and none of that ever lasted. It just got worse and worse. I was with a woman. We had a relationship going. I fell in love with the idea of having a family and fitting in somewhere. My marriage, it just bombed out. We ended up where we could stand each other. We got a divorce. As soon as that happened, my drinking picked up again, and I done what I always done. I packed my stuff and took off. After that, I served some time. I went to prison again, and prison became a pretty common part of my life, prison or jail. Then I went from there. I had discharge here for child support, being a deadbeat dad, and it just so happened that the day that I came to this jail, March 7th, a Thursday, they said, well, we got this new church that's coming in and putting on a big concert for everybody, and they got donuts and coffee, and it was First.church. I really had no intentions of doing anything except going, seeing what it was about, because they said it was a concert and that, and there was free donuts and coffee. There was only like 3 or 4 rows, but I ended up moving up a little closer so I could see the screen good, and yeah, it just, the music, and then Pastor John came on, and the first thing he said was he welcomed everybody. This is, he's on the screen preaching to us, but it's like he's there and talking to each individual. When he preaches a message, we go in there and we have church, and it's like he's talking directly to me. He says, the very first thing is, welcome to First.church. Nobody's perfect and everybody's welcome. I mean, that's me. I'm not perfect, far. I'm all the way at the other end of the spectrum of that. But it's the fact of being welcomed. And I felt that. It wasn't just something that was said, I felt it. I remember walking up to Grant, and I was like, would you pray for me? He was like, yeah. And we just prayed, man, and right there, it came out. I'm broken, man. 47 years old, and just everything I've ever done failed, and I had no more answers. I asked, will you accept me? I accept you as my Lord and Savior, and I've screwed up everything I've ever tried to do. I don't have no other answers, and I prayed, and I'm telling you, it wasn't repeating something and just going through the motions. I felt it, and I felt it, and it filled my body. And I cried. And there's a gymnasium full of men, strangers and stuff, and it didn't matter in that moment, man. It didn't matter. I definitely know that day, the running was done. I was accepted. Somebody loved me enough without me being perfect, with me being as far away from perfect as could possibly be, to turn around and love me unconditionally. And the love didn't even make sense to me until that point in time. The only reason I am free from my bondage is because of Jesus working through you guys from First.church. I want to thank you, First.church, for your time and taking responsibility, not saying that you don't have the time or you can't afford it. I wouldn't be the person that I am if it wasn't for First.church. Thank you.
Well, Jerry is such an inspiration to us. He is he's become a real leader in the jail. And Sheriff has just talked about how he's become a role model for the other inmates, sharing Jesus with them, helping lead Bible studies there. And he has just shown a voracious appetite for not just loving Jesus, but learning to understand His Word. And after he gets released, he has permission to go back into the jail and continue to help lead ministry there, which is something he's expressed interest in. And also, with some help from our church, he secured post-release employment with a construction company that will be building our building in Hebron, which I think is really cool, that he will now be helping build that building. And he was reached by your lives, and now his life is around reaching people, right? And I don't know what he dreamed of having his nets be full of before, but he is a fisher of men. He's a fisher of people. That's what he wants. That's his life, because people are what matters in Christ Jesus. People are what matters. This is something that I'd leave a boat full of fish for in the sun. God calls us to be fishers of people. Jerry was reached, but now he's reaching. That is something I'd walk away from all the other parts of my life for. I mean, I look at my dreams and my desires and what I've wanted to pull up in my nets. There's no hobby, no vacation, no gift I could give to my wife or kids that is greater than being a fisher of people. Jesus replied to Simon Peter, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. And I just think, it's Commitment Sunday, and as a church, there are so many of us who are saying, Jesus, we're ready to do the same. We're ready to go and do likewise. We're ready to do this. And today is something special. Grant and Elise put together a special song, and normally we would all sing, and at the end of the service we will, but during this one, this is just a special thing where they're going to be singing a duet, and we're going to listen and pray and worship. And I think that the words to this song speak powerfully to us. And as they're singing, we're going to give. The deacons are going to be coming forward during their song, and we're going to do our regular tithes and offerings in the offering plates as they're passed, but also it's an opportunity to bring our commitment cards. And I know that many of you have already turned those in, but if you haven't already done so, this is a great chance for you to say, here we are, Lord, we're ready. You can still text to give. It's not too late by texting Relentless to 474747 or something like that. But I also asked, just before we start singing, for Elise to come and just share a little bit about what the song means to her and why we asked her to do this. So, Elise, if you could.
Thanks, Pastor John. So, 5 years ago, my life looked really similar to Jerry's. I was lost. I didn't know Jesus. I was filled with anxiety, and my life, it was empty and purposeless. And you guys as a church, before I even knew where DeMater Wheatfield was, you guys made a decision to transform this worship experience, to make it a place where no one was perfect and everyone would be welcome. And I remember walking into the church with Dakota and standing next to my in-laws and the Van Soos family and singing, "Bless the Lord, O my soul," and Grant and Jeff were worshiping. And it was the first time I was like, wow, Jesus could be something in my life. And man, 5 years later, because of your sacrifice and your faithfulness, my life has been transformed. My marriage has been transformed. And man, I can't tell you, if it wasn't for this church, I don't think I would be following Jesus and standing in front of you today. And so I know Dakota and I, we are so excited to be able to be a part of going to Hebron, this adventure we are going on, to be able to reach people just like us for Jesus. I can't think of anything more exciting. And you guys, I want to say thank you to all of you who have been a part of First Church, for your sacrifice, for allowing Jesus to work through you so that, man, me and Dakota, we had the opportunity to give our lives to him. You guys left the fish for me. I dreamed I went to heaven. You were there with me. We walked along the streets of gold beside the crystal sea. We heard the angels singing. Then someone called your name. You turned and saw a young man, and he was smiling as he came. He said, "Friend, you may not know me now, but you remember the time a missionary came to your church. His pictures made you cry. You didn't have much money, but you gave it anyway. And Jesus took the gift you gave, and that's why I'm in heaven today. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm a life that was changed. that you gave. Miracles when you move, such an easy thing for you to do. Your hand is moving right now. You are still showing up at the tomb of every Lazarus. Your voice is calling me out right now. I know you're able, and my God, come through again. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. Everything's possible by the power of the Holy Ghost. A new wind is blowing right now, breaking my heart of stone, taking over like it's Jericho. And my walls are all crashing down right now. I know you're able, and my God, come through again. You can do all things. You can do all things but fail. Yes, you never lost a battle. No, you never lost a battle. And I know you never will. One by one they came, as far as the eye could see. Each one somehow touched by your generosity. Little things that you had done, sacrifices made, unnoticed on the earth, but now heaven now proclaims. And I know up in heaven that you're not supposed to cry, but I was almost sure that there were tears in your eyes as Jesus took your hand and you stood before the Lord. He said, my child, look around you, for great is your reward. You can do all things. You can do all things but fail, 'cause you've never lost a battle. No, you never lost a battle. And I know you never will. You can do all things. You can do all things but fail, 'cause you never lost a battle. No, you never lost a battle. And I know you never will. And I know you never will.
I know that you never will.
I know
that you never will.
That was not the end of the story for Peter. He watches Jesus. He has this miraculous catch. And as soon as they landed, he left everything and followed Jesus. He follows Jesus for 3 years. You know what's interesting is over the course of those 3 years, I think he began to forget about the miracle. All the miracles, you know? He just got used to Netflix. He just got used to his dreams being fulfilled. He starts to take it for granted, and eventually he loses heart. And what happens? What happens? He returns to his old life. On the night Jesus was betrayed, he denies 3 times that he even knows Jesus. And he goes back to fishing. I wonder this morning if there's someone here like that. Maybe this is the part of the message for you. You love Jesus. You were so into it. You were passionate about it. But over time, you just wandered away. I want you to check out what happens to Peter after the resurrection of Jesus. He's abandoned Jesus. He's walked away from his faith. After 3 years of following him, he just sort of fades to black. But in John chapter 21, verse 3, it says, Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. I'm going back to my old life, right? And he led others with him. Said, we'll come too, they said. So they went out to the boat, but they caught nothing at all. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't even see who he was. I feel like that's so many of us, isn't it? Jesus is standing on the beach of our life, but we've drifted so far away from him, we can no longer see who he is, right? And we wonder where he's gone, and it's not him that's moved. It's just us who have drifted away over the course of time. We don't, God, I don't hear your voice anymore. I don't see you anymore. Where are you? He's where he's always been. But we've drifted away. He called out, fellas, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. They don't even recognize the master's voice. They don't even recognize the master's voice as they've drifted away. But Jesus is about to remind them of that old story years ago. Then he said, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you get some fish. So they did. And they couldn't haul it in because there were so many fish in it. The disciples said to Peter, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, and he jumped in the water, and he headed for shore. And Jesus just reminded Peter of who he is. He says, hey, remember, I can do all things. I'm the miracle worker. I never lost a battle. I never lose. I never fail. I think God is calling to some of us today, just reminding us of who he is, reminding us of his love, reminding us of his power, reminding us of his voice. As we close, I just want to ask everybody to stand to your feet. I want us to reprise a part of that song, but I want us to make this a declaration as a church. I want us to affirm our faith in who he is, but some of you, you're going to come back to Jesus like Peter in this song. And I thought about, I can end with an invitation and, do this deal and have you guys raise your hands and I could, lead you in a prayer or whatever, but I thought, why can't this song be the prayer? Why can't we lift up our hands in worship to him through this song? Why can't we just come back to him right now? And I know there's some of you here today, this is what you came for. You didn't come for a capital campaign, you came to come back to Jesus today. In this song, I want you to come back to him. I want you to give him your fears and your passions. I want you to repent and return. I want you to be a relentless, unstoppable, undeterred, unflappable follower of Christ. Leave the boat at the shore and follow Jesus. Guys, would you lead us in one more time through this song?